Then I had PD officers trying to corridor the area. I got to the point where I told them to get in their vehicle and shut off their heating system or there was air conditioner running, because you could actually literally taste those chemicals in the air, even sitting in a rig with everything off. And that's not a good situation to be in.
Early in my life, I was pounded by a football coach who said, if you're green, you're growing, if you're ripe, you're dying. So I've always tried to keep that mindset that I got to continuously learn, and it's all aspects, right? It's not just, it's leadership, it's your personal life. It's like all these things that you got to continuously mold and make better. And then I feel like my job as a BC is to create exceptional people.
Welcome to Ops Talk, Westminster Fire Department's operational training podcast, where we share ideas and knowledge through honest conversations, highlighting the people who do the work. I'm Eric Linenberger, Deputy Chief of Operations. While built as a resource for our members, we invite the greater fire service and the community to be part of the conversation. What we share reflects our current approach under present conditions. Always follow your department's procedures and guidelines. Hey everyone, welcome to the Ops Talk podcast. I'm your host, Eric Linenberger, Deputy Chief of Operations. And man, we've got a great show for you today. I've got a couple really great guests, and our topic is going to be all things battery fires, emerging topic in our industry that we don't really get a lot of guidance on. And I've got two guests here that are going to help us out with that. Our first guest is Battalion Chief David Varney. David's a second-generation firefighter who served with the Westminster Fire Department for 29 years. He's risen through the ranks from firefighter to engineer to lieutenant to captain to his current role as the B-Shift Battalion Chief for, I believe, a little over 11 years. He leads the department's health and wellness program, was a longtime fire investigator, and has been involved in so many committees and special teams over his career. He's a graduate of the National Fire Academy Executive Fire Officer Program and founded the Firehouse Fishing Company, where he connects first responders to share his love of fishing as an outlet for mental resiliency and wellness. And you got to check out his YouTube channel. I'll link it in the show notes. Next, we have Battalion Chief Luke Gearhard. Luke has served with Westminster Fire Department for 18 years, rising through the ranks of firefighter, lieutenant, captain, into his current role as the A-Shift Battalion Chief for the last 2 years. Chief Gearhard has led the department's SCBA program for about 8 years and spent 17 years as an engine boss on the department's wildland team. He was a longtime shift lead for the dive team and contributes regionally as a member of the North Area Electric Vehicle and Lithium-Ion Fire Committee, which is why he's on the show today. Welcome to the show, my good friends, David and Luke. How you guys doing today?
Doing great. Glad to have us here today.
Did I miss anything? I know there's a lot more that you guys have both done. Anything else that I missed that you want to add? Let people know.
I think we're good to go on my end.
Yeah, nothing of importance.
I think there's a lot of importance. You guys are just super humble, and it's amazing to me how much you are involved in. And so many of our people that way, being this, you'll hear me say it multiple times on these shows, a medium-sized fire department, we get a lot of opportunity to be involved in a lot of things, and it's really what makes us tick. And really appreciate all of your involvement, and appreciate you coming on the show today. We're going to be talking about battery storage systems, lithium-ion batteries. We'll spend quite a bit of time, obviously, on the EV vehicle fire issue. I know that's a lot of the conversation, but I think it's bigger than that. We've had photovoltaic systems and energy storage systems in place for many years in our community, and never have really gotten great guidance on how to deal with those. And then these smaller battery, portable battery fires and issues are causing a lot of trouble across the United States. Maybe we haven't seen it as much as some of our big urban environments, and New York City is dealing with it big time, and some of our other big cities where those scooters are a means of transportation around town. But then, of course, we'll get into the EV fire situation. Those things are all over the place on our roads today, and we brought you guys on today for a couple reasons. One, Chief Gearhard has been involved in our region building policies. And I was really impressed with the way they came up with these 3 policies. And I'll have him talk about that here in a minute. And it's going to guide each one of those areas. And Chief Varney has a ton of experience as a battalion chief and has had his own experiences with all of these types of fires, including a recent EV fire that we're going to profile here in a bit. So I'd like to just turn it over to you guys. I'll stop talking. Luke, let's talk a little bit about these 3 policies. If you can break them down, talk about the 3 different topic areas, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
You bet. So let me just give a little background. So we kind of, Chief Lindenberger gave me the directive to seek out and produce best practices for the WFD and figure out how we want to start handling these things. And as firefighters do and fire departments do, we started seeking out what other people had already started doing. And then we tried to collaborate all that information into one big pile and then sort out what we felt was the most pertinent information that we could take and then create best practices for Westy first. So in the midst of putting all that information together, we started reaching out across the nation, essentially. We got contacts with New York Fire, Phoenix Fire. We spent a lot of time talking to Seattle Fire because they've done a lot of different things trying to mitigate EV fires, lithium-ion battery fires. At one point, they had submergible tanks that they were putting cars in. So just a lot of really great departments with a lot of great resources that had time and effort and money and all that stuff set aside to try to create great policy. So we pulled all that stuff together and started kind of dialing in what we wanted to put together for our department. And then in the mix of all of that, we run with a bunch of different departments called the North area. So there's a bunch of regional collaboration. Our borders don't necessarily truly exist between our cities. We merge over quite a bit. So we run operations with different departments on the daily, on dozens of calls every day. So we got together as a North area and tried to come together and kind of figure out what that North area policy would look like. But even in that, it was the same thing. Everybody in their department was chasing down their own information, chasing down their own direction, creating their own policies. And as we all know, like sometimes these committees, they get bogged down because people's opinions become the most important portion of the committee and not necessarily coming together and creating policy, right? Never seen that happen before. But we had a really strong leader from that ran this program, and after some conversation and people's varying opinions on how we need to do operations, for lack of better words, he decided that we were going to create like an umbrella policy. So with underneath that umbrella, there would be different operational specifics that were able to be chosen by different departments. So it's basically a guideline of these are the options that are out there. We're going to fall within these, but different organizations, we're going to choose different ways in which to run that. And so we kind of broke it down. It's kind of the way in which lithium-ion and EV vehicles are broken down. We have stationary policies such as, photovoltaic systems in houses, and then we're seeing a lot of transition, especially with communication. They used to do like a solid state acid-based batteries, and now they're moving to these EV batteries because they have a longer life and can store more energy. So that kind of thought process, which even if we don't think we have those places within our cities, we have multiple places, or even within our own region. And then we had like a small EV policy, which kind of encompasses the cell phone, the DeWalt battery, all the way up to like a small scooter type incident. And then we have the big EV vehicles, which kind of encompasses. The 2 policies are kind of mirrored, so you can have a small battery pack in a golf cart, or you can have a larger golf cart that would fit into our other EV, just because they're going in different directions. But then the bigger EV is just kind of addressing those EV vehicles that are out on the street currently and more that are coming in all the time. And then as Chief mentioned, like this is a continuous revolving door. So we created these probably not less than 6 months easily, and we've already gone back multiple times and make new iterations, add in new information, and because the science continues to change, there's a lot of things that were just like best thought practices that weren't tested, and now we have corporations with UL Learning and those organizations that are doing a lot of testing, and we're actually putting science behind our tactics. So that's a whole new exciting phase. So we're actually taking the science and trying to apply it to what we're doing.
Yeah, it's some good work you guys have done, and I will reiterate. I know you heard it in the intro, but this is currently what we're operating under. These things are going to change, and I don't want to talk about this like it's gospel or it's the only way to do this. It's just the way that we have found right now, and we're going to keep a close eye on science and keep evolving with that. I'm just honestly amazed that this group was able to come together because, as Luke mentioned, we operate in a AutoAid CAD to CAD environment with basically six other fire departments, and this group had representatives from all that came together, brought each one of their best practices, which, you know, there was some similarities, but there were definitely some things that differed. And I thought for sure this was going to be one of those that was going to get caught up in committee for forever. And I'm just impressed by the way that this worked. And I think it's a lesson that I think we need to talk about a little bit. Do you have any, I don't know, I guess just tips or ideas of what made this actually work well? Because we gave you guys the assignment and you had this thing out within a couple of months. That's typically not the way we work in the fire service, especially when we've got 6 other fire departments involved in that.
Yeah, and I think it's an evolution also, right? Like when we very first started talking about the North area, we kind of talked in definites. Like we were going to have these North area SOGs that all people were going to follow to the T. And the reality is that each one of our departments has just different needs, you know? So years ago, as part of the hose committee, and that's a prime example. We spent months and months of trying to come together with the perfect hose load, the perfect thing, just for departments to come back and be like, it doesn't work for us. But then we would get so caught up in that we had to have this definite SOG that all people abided by that it almost came stagnant. So it took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of learning from that. So from that to this, which is years later, coming to the understanding that we do have different needs in our different districts. If we can just be in line in our thought process, so when BCs or company officers show up on scene, they at least have a direction in which they're moving instead of just being blasted by something they have no idea. So that idea with this committee and just the objective of like, hey, we have to put this down on paper as best and as complete as possible that everybody feels comfortable with. And it was the same thing, man. Like we took in a dozen different ideas from a dozen different departments. We're able to say, hey, they aren't that far apart. So how do we combine them all together and then put them on paper? And the reality of it is that, you know, the standalone facility, the small battery, that's pretty cut and dry. Like those are pretty easy across the board, pretty standardized across the nation, really. It's the EV stuff. And it's just like, again, right? Like there is not a whole lot of science supports that all the pieces to it. So we're trying to still put together best practices of what we think is going to be the best thing. And then through other outside agencies doing their stuff, through our experiences, we're coming together again and revamp it and just make it cleaner and cleaner as much as we possibly can until they get rid of EV vehicles altogether, go to a different battery system, and then we'll start the process again.
And, I think you just hit it, Luke. I think the key takeaway from all that is there's a baseline of how we're going to operate, and it continues to evolve. So that's the most important part, in my opinion, is that flexibility of adapting as things change, because they're going to continue. And that allows us in that SOG to continue to make changes as necessary.
And just one more thing, Chief. I know we talked about the CAD to CAD in this regional thing, but I'm not sure the audience understands either that the BC group gets together every morning before our shift. We have a great conversation. It's like an information sharing highway. So we've had, a handful of EV vehicles on fires in Westie, but over the regions, we've had a dozen, right? So we don't have the ability to have all the knowledge of all experience, but between all the different departments, we do, and we continuously have these conversations about strategy and tactics. And way more than just the EV portion of it, right? Or Lithium-Ion, like we cover all sorts of things. So I feel like we're in a very unique and pretty cool situation for our creation of policies and education.
Yeah, totally agree. And for those that might not know, we are in the North Denver area, and we've come together with all these departments. And you hit on it earlier. We all have different needs. We're all crossing borders, and we're running calls as if we're all kind of within the same department. We kind of operate as if we're, different divisions, or districts or battalions within one big department. However, we still have our own individual needs. We've got We are very urban in some of our areas. Some of our departments are very commercial, but then we've got very rural areas out on the east side too, and we've got oil and gas, we've got industry, we've got all the different things, and so it really is cool that we're able to come together and learn from one another, and we operate. We're so much stronger now because of it, and our region is so much better off because of it. And as long as we can, keep our egos out of the way and run a committee like this one did, where we were just truly trying to get to the best practices, like you said, Dave. This is by no means the gospel that we're going to follow forever, and it's not written very extremely descriptive either. I mean, it is left as a guideline. We've always been more of a guideline driven department because we know that things change and we're going to have to adapt on the fly. And we'll talk about probably some of that creativity that's going to happen on some of these calls. No one call is going to be the same. So yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm just always amazed by, bringing all these people together with all these great ideas, and sometimes it just falls flat. But I think that this one was a really productive committee. So let's talk real quick about the storage systems a little bit, the photovoltaic systems that have been a part of our communities for a while, and just talk about basic, what our basic approach is going to be. That, let's think about that first arriving company officer and that first IC and some of the things that they should be thinking about.
Yeah, but I think one of the biggest takeaways that we need, and we talk about it even with our young firefighters, like they need to have a concept of what they're walking into. So it's that initial size up, because I think a lot of times we forget or we don't do a good job of enunciating what we're actually seeing. So being able to get on scene and actually paint the picture that there are panels on the roof. And the other portion of that, and it's the thing that we don't talk about very much either, is that now these vehicles they're powering electricity two ways, right? So if a vehicle is fully charged inside their garage, it is now becoming a power source and is backfeeding into their house. So it's more than just the panels on the roof. We got to start thinking about these other facilities that are, a vehicle inside the garage or a vehicle plugged in, and then just understanding the science, because even in those realms, right, like we have changed what our expectations are, or even what is out there, because we have the ability to shut power off, or there should be a shut off, but there's not a standardization of location. It can be in the garage, it can be by a panel. Our panels in our city are across the board. They can be in the basement, they can be outside, they can be in the garage, they can be behind the door, right? So the standardization is not there, but the thought process of actually identifying potential hazards and then making decisions that are leading us to mitigate that. I think that's a very important portion of the house thought process of of the EV and battery storage portions of the houses.
Yeah, and I think apparatus positioning is an important thing to keep in mind as well. Really thinking about whether we should be putting our apparatus right front and center in front of that garage or not. And I think this policy talks about that a little bit. And we had that incident right up the road, a Mountain View fire, just like, what was that, a year or two ago? And I've actually got, let me see if I've got that video that I can share. So something to keep in mind, we will be sharing a couple of videos here on the video version, but we'll try to explain what we're talking about here for those that are just listening audio. So I know that video's kind of circulated the internet a little bit, but nobody was expecting that. I think in that call, it was a vehicle charging in the garage, I believe maybe a hybrid, but it was the gases that built up, and I think they had light hazy smoke conditions. It wasn't even a big deal. You saw the officer there in the front driveway just walking around. He kind of partially geared up. I don't think they definitely weren't ready for that.
No.
I can give you another example. We had a single family dwelling structure fire. We get on scene. We have a working fire in the Alpha Delta corner, and we sent a crew in, hose line. as normal. It's nighttime. And then we identify when they start to extinguish the fire, that the fire will not go out. And I hear back through the radio, hey, we need an additional line in here. We have a copious amounts of water. Well, what occurred was one of the bike's battery chargers had ignited and it continued to energize. It was plugged in on the bed after we did mitigate the situation, but that continued to off gas. So we had to readjust how we mitigated that incident. We had to actually get that electric bike out of the structure and put it in a safe area. But that thing continued to off gas. So now we have people on deck or also on level 1 for those that have people sitting out in front, those crews. Now we have to move everyone because now we have all these gases exterior floating in the area on that opposite side of the structure. So we have to adapt and overcome and change our strategy and tactic based on what we have.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk a lot about those vapors and the smoke that's being produced here. I mean, it is so toxic, so dangerous, whether it's a emergency or an electric vehicle charging, or it's a portable battery inside a structure. It's super toxic, and we need to be really concerned about that. What else, Luke, on our approach for these, specifically like say a photovoltaic panel on the top of a house? I know there's going to be a difference on whether, is it the panel that's involved in fire, or is there a fire around it? What are some general things to think about if we're up on that roof or we're trying to extinguish that fire from down below?
Yeah, so I think you're spot on, right? So it's early identification of what we have. Like it's the same thing, chimney fire. Is it truly chimney fire, or is it a structure fire? Is it truly the panel, or is it a structure fire? Being isolate that power immediately so we can shut off that stuff. But everybody, like we always talk about it. Even at night, those panels can still produce energy and get going. And then it's the thought process of do we put somebody on that roof, or do we not? So utilizing an aerial, putting somebody on the backside of a roof that doesn't have panels on it, that identifying it, and then access. So right, so if we have access from underneath, then it is truly a structure fire that may have been caused by electrical, and not just continuous electrical. Then we can put that fire out. But then if not, then we have to treat it as electrical fire and take those precautions as well.
And we always need to remember that those things are energized all the time.
And not just those, it's the house,
and
right? All outlets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We had one similar to that, and that's a great point because, hey, we hear that, oh, we're responding to a structure fire. It looks like it's in the attic space. That's where we have to slow things down a little bit, especially at nighttime when you don't get those visuals. And we had one of those systems on top of a tiled roof. The crews did their 360. They made their way to the electrical, shut the power off. The power still was not on. It continued to charge the way it was set up. So you got to be thinking one step ahead of the game in that IC or those officers. We need to get Excel. We need to get the electric company out there because they need to de-energize that. And then as far as mitigating the fire, you have to address that because, in my opinion, we have to be cautious about putting someone on the roof, especially if it's a tiled roof and it's on fire with solar. So then we have to fight that fire from underneath and get access to it quickly. So we got to kind of think outside these boxes before we just rush into the scene and try to mitigate that incident.
And think about the two separations. Like we have panels that generate power for houses direct. We have panels that generate power for houses plus or feeding into a battery system that's located in the basement, right? So we essentially have potential of two different scenes. So we got to have that consideration too. So when we're fighting these things, it's more than just going to the roof. We got to do a full search, look for additional equipment in there and make sure we're covering all of our bases.
I had two different types of panel fires, including that one where it was burning up on the roof and it was burning on the side because it energized up to the solar and then came back down and fed into the electrical panel. And I was not comfortable with my guys over there other than just controlling that the exposures. And it didn't stop until we got Excel out there to de-energize that entire area.
The whole thing, yeah,
because it was not going to be shut down by our guys.
Yeah, I kind of sometimes, like, thinking about this, I always think about how we can do better with our blue card, but we do a really good job with thinking attics and thinking basements, but we probably should, in our conversations, talk about what these additional hazards are, like EV cars in the garage, panels on the roof.
The one I was on, not only did we have energy and fire up on the solar panel itself where it was arcing and catching fire, that power actually came back from the solar, pushed back into the electrical box. Now we had the electrical box on fire.
Oh, wow.
So then we had to basically protect exposures. And then the key was call early, call quick, get the electric company out there so they can mitigate and shut that power down in that area before things get better.
Yeah, we can never trust anything until we've got that verification from the experts, getting them in there. So yeah, you're going to take you figure out that it is that electrical panel that's on fire. You're going to keep your distance. We're going to have to spray some water, but you're going to do it from a significant distance. And then I think the other thing to remember is for those crews that maybe they are battling an actual attic fire with panels above them, there's conduit and electricity running all over the place up there. So extra caution with that. And then, we've talked, I think the original classes we had way back in the day, they talked about covering up those panels and, that you can de-energize them at nighttime. You can feel a little bit safer, but I'm just never comfortable, feeling like we've got that thing completely de-energized. So we always have to act as if it's energized.
It seems like I haven't done the research, but it seems like it's a low frequency. So in my career, I've never been a part of a solar panel fire. Dave's saying he's only had a couple in his career, so it's a low frequency, but it's a high consequence. Yeah.
Well, let's move to the portable batteries a little bit more. We've touched on it a little bit. Dave, you talked about your event that you had. We recently had one at one of our hospitals where it was just, we're talking about a little, e-scooter that you could buy at probably Walmart or something. And I believe the story was it was an employee that, rode that thing to work and then took it up to the locker room and outside the operating room area. And then all of a sudden somebody starts hearing it like hissing and popping and starting to off gas a little bit. And so luckily, I believe it was the owner of it was smart enough to get it out of that area. I think they took it to the stairwell and then eventually got it outside. But we're talking about a simple battery, a small battery at that. This thing was not a big, powerful unit. And it could have wreaked havoc within that hospital. It turned what would have been a nothing call into something pretty significant. You have anything to add on that, Luke, and how you guys came to this policy for the portable batteries and kind of the things that we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so we stole a piece of our EV policy and applied it to this too, but this is one of those things that we've been dealing with battery fires for a long time. We've just now started to identify these battery fires and then take other precautions, which has led us to the PPE, led us to exposures, all those type of things. So looking at DeWalt batteries and stuff like that, and I've gone on one garage fire in District 1 on several occasions. The guy has a bunch of RC vehicles and with power chargers going, and he's lit that place on fire a couple times. So the policy has taken a bunch of the stuff that we've done for a long time, so some of the EV stuff, and just kind of combined it into like a best practices thing. So essentially, right, the removal of the source is our best option. But we have to be careful in that process of removal. We need to be in proper PPE and on air, right? Because we're protecting ourselves from the off gassing of it. And then it's also the heat exposure to it, because those things can burn extremely hot and have potential of, the flare ups plus the explosion portion of it. So always utilizing some sort of tool to remove it from the house or wherever it is. So those guys with the heads up job of doing it, pulling it out of the ER, I can only imagine how much. We've seen videos, right, of New York where they have EV scooters that go off in an apartment and it banks down in like 30 seconds. I can only imagine the impact that would have had on the ER. But there's other processes too, right? So as we're going in there, if we have put out a fire and then it's identified that the EV or a lithium-ion battery is the cause of it, we need to have good communication with BCs and fire investigators to make sure that we can make sure that it's appropriate time to remove that out of there. There's always things to keep in your mind. There's always potential. A battery always has potential as long as it has energy, even if it's just a smidge of energy. So even though it may have a low heat or it may appear that it's out, if you disrupt that battery again and it's damaged, it can start again. So good conversation about the removal of stuff. Make sure our fire investigators don't need that for the investigation portion of it. And then the other portion is too, is like once we remove it, we try to never remove it from property. We want to make sure that we're not becoming accountable for it, because then it becomes our problem. That was like a big thing with New York. They were taking all this stuff, but then they had no place to get rid of it. And so we do have companies that have the ability to do it. We're pushing out. We have 3 small battery buckets that are filled with like a special medium that reduces the heat and suffocates the oxygen. So if we do have like a cell phone or a battery that will fit in that, they're on 3 different rigs across our city. One's on our bureau rig. We can call those apparatus to come. We can put the battery in there, and then we have the ability to ship it off and get done. But also within the city, I mean, we're going way tangents. Think about like all like the Geek Squad at Best Buy and like all these places that are electronic stores. They have those same containers. So sometimes we've had calls where they've had a lithium-ion battery go off on a cell phone. They'll call us and want us to mitigate it, but they've already mitigated it. So if the hazard is gone, we ask them to keep it and take care of it for themselves. So the policy tries to capture all those different pieces, right? Trying to remove the source if it's still on fire. We put the fire out if we can. If we can identify it early, that helps us with what we need to do afterwards as far as decon and PPE, cleaning and all that stuff. Make sure our fire investigators are involved so we're not removing evidence from the fire scene, and then just our mitigation portion of it.
I did want to talk about that a little bit, make sure that people know that we are carrying these buckets, and it does feel weird. Like we've always been used to mitigating these incidents and then feeling like, take the problem away from the homeowner, and whether that's for a lot of times that's in our structure fires where we're bringing in a restoration company and we're turning over that scene to them. With this, it feels a little bit weird to consider putting that battery in a bucket and leaving it with them. We're going to give them really good instructions, but that's also for the benefit of the insurance company as well, from what I understand, so that they can come in and do their investigation. So it does feel really, really weird, but it is the guidance we're giving right now. We're not going to put that thing on the fire engine and take it back, because we know what firefighters will do with it. They'll just probably find the dumpster in the back and get rid of it. But so that is the procedure for that. I wanted to talk real quick too about, how these things can be explosive. And I was listening to a podcast somewhere and they were talking about, I believe it was FDNY in Chicago. They will use the tick after the fire to go in. And it's part of the overhaul procedure now to make sure, if those batteries explode, they still have multiple cells in them, and to make sure that you've found every single cell in there, because you could have yourself a rekindle or a significant toxic event if you don't. So really think about that during the overhaul phase.
Yeah, and that's one of the pieces that even in our policy, it states that we tick to 200 degrees or below. Make sure that it's not increasing temperature, but we'll make sure that's 200 degrees or below. So FSRI just came out and stated that 200 degrees that was just a number that we pulled out. We're like, yeah, this is it. And they're showing that that's not true. So they had a EV vehicle that they burned. It was under 109 degrees, temperatures decreasing. They moved it to put it onto the tow truck. It lit on fire again. Right. So even that stuff, like it's in our policies. Everybody's like, oh, this is what it is. So we just have to do our due diligence. Like you're saying, Chief, like make sure like if everything is accounted for, make sure that all of our temperatures are low, and it's more than just 200 degrees. We got to make sure that we're pulling everything out of it. And it's funny because like, all of us were BCs. We've all been on fires, and how many of those fires either were caused by a battery or had batteries involved because of the location, and we did nothing with it, right? We didn't even think of that, Right. So now we're aware of it. So now we're just trying to do our due diligence. And I look at Dave with our health and wellness stuff. So now that we've identified all these batteries and the potential health risks of it, right? So now, like, that's a whole nother arena that we got to start tackling, like our PPE contaminations, our exposure portions of it. Like how out is an out when you let somebody go in there with no respiration, right? Like all those stuff. What kind of monitors are we doing?
Exactly.
So it's a whole nother gamut that we got to start chasing down.
Yeah, it really is. And you mentioned, the decon thing as well. And this is something that I think the message is out there, especially when it comes to, say, an electric vehicle fire. We're going to talk about that. We know that we're going to decon the heck out of our gear. We're going to do gross decon at the scene. We're going to bag it and we're going to send it off. Most likely, if they were directly exposed, it's going off for CO2 cleaning. But I don't think we always think about it at these battery fires within a structure fire. We go in, we fight the structure fire, and there are batteries all over the place within these structures. Now, whether it was the cause of the fire or
Right.
it was just involved in the fire,
Right.
I say we need to be aware of that. And so we really need to be thinking about decon. I mean, I know we've upped our game big time over the years with decon. We are very aggressive with that. And our department does a really good job. Our whole region does a good job with that. But I think we need to think a little bit differently. And the people that were directly exposed, even if it was just maybe it is that scooter that was outside in the open air, but you still had to go extinguish it. If you were exposed to it, you're probably going to have to send your gear off for CO2 cleaning.
Absolutely. And you also have to think of other things, and we'll get into it on the EV fire we had, but it's not just about your PPE. It's about your apparatus. It's about the police departments, everything around creating that barrier, because now you have, one of the biggest two is, the hydrogen fluoride and hydrogen cyanide. That's actually going to be floating in the air if you have your vents open on your vehicles. You have your windows, your doors open on your rigs. If that plume switches and changes, now you've just contaminated your entire rig. So we have to start thinking outside the box, because now we're going to be exposed even more than we ever have been.
It's all in the same realm, because I think about the PPE stuff, and we have a really great policy written about soft material, right? But we don't talk about hard material, like our helmets or our boots, like our leather straps that we carry our radios on. Like we don't talk about those pieces, right? You have your name written on it. You've had it 20 years. Think that person's kind of want to turn that in now at decon, right? So there are other considerations that we got to start thinking about with this stuff, because like Dave's saying, I am not a hazmat guy, but all I know it is bad stuff, and it lasts for a long time. So we just got to make sure we're doing the right thing.
Right.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that that Sacramento incident that happened too. Did you guys both read about that and see those videos? I mean, that was a simple, seemed like car fire type of situation, and that they weren't even up close to the vehicle. I mean, it really sounds like they still had their distance, and all four of them are like lifetime health effects and lung impact, and all the heavy metals that are burning, and we just can't emphasize it enough. And so I think it is a good time to transition over to EV vehicle. So Dave, you had this recent event, and I think this is probably going to be about the most common event that we're going to start seeing across the country. We just saw one down the road, South Metro, that video that we were kind of floating around. That was the same call that you had, Dave. And it's these usually these big, powerful, rapid chargers, and people trying to charge their vehicle as quickly as they can. And a lot of times it's not that. It's usually like a Tesla charger, but it's not a Tesla on the charger. It's like in your case, it was a Nissan Leaf. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing out there. I'll just share the video from your call. I've got this video and it's kind of fragmented. So you're going to see the very, very beginning when you guys showed up and looked like you really could extinguish this fire. And you'll see there's really minimal smoke at that time. It looks like the firefighter is getting a good knock on it. He's cooling things down. But what we don't realize is that you're flowing all the water in the world on it, and it's going into thermal runaway. And so
and just to tee it up a little bit, when this thing came in, you got to be listening to that radio, because it did come in as an EV fire, came in as a vehicle fire. So, normal response. And then you start listening to music, listening to the communication on the radio, and you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't sound right. So then we have to pivot and start making sure we have the right resources there sooner than later.
Right. And before we play this, let's talk about some of those resources. I mean, we're talking
Right.
you need some help. So you're going to need some extra fire resources, but you should probably also be getting a tow truck en route.
Absolutely.
These things are hazmats. We need to start getting at least get a consult with our hazmat lead, and start treating these things as hazmat calls, which is what you guys did.
You're spot on with that. It's a change to how we used to do business on vehicle fires, bottom line.
Yeah.
And we got to slow it down, what I learned from, and get the right resources there sooner than later.
All right.
And as you're teeing up, Chief, this is one of the things, in our best practices, we're asking our company officers. It's a new culture change for us, really, because before we never thought twice about vehicle fires, but we're asking them to ask for more information en route if they're not getting it. Like if they have a vehicle fire, they got to ask, can you identify as an EV vehicle or not? And then we're asking them to make good decisions upon that portion, right? Like if they have vehicle fire or is unidentified, they start calling in for additional resources.
Right. And some of that identification that we do have in Colorado, just so people know, you either have to have the electric vehicle license plate, or you have to have that sticker up in the right corner of your windshield. So it's just something that we can kind of, without getting too close to the vehicle, those are some indicators.
Right. And I can explain right before this video here, just for those that may be just listening in. Basically, we were at a 7-Eleven. The Bravo side was a restaurant, and then the Alpha side would have been the 7-Eleven, and then directly in front of me was obviously the vehicle. And then we had a fence behind there with residential homes. And then to the right, which would have been the Delta side, we have more businesses, a Starbucks. This was late afternoon, almost getting to evening, as you can see. And the only information we got once we determined it was EV fire, the owner said, hey, I disconnected the power to the vehicle, which was awesome, from the main. But then we tried putting water underneath it, did not work. So then we had a different conversation of what we were going to do. And so I'll go ahead and let you play this, and then we can go from there.
What you're seeing right now is, you saw the initial clip with the firefighter. It was still up against the Charger. By this time, you guys had brought the tow company in and you towed it away. You drug it away from the Charger, which is exactly the right thing to do. So there's a little bit of time elapsed here.
One more thing on top of this is we disconnected it, but we were concerned still there was the power main system was not deactivated. So we also called an Excel, had them deactivate it in between that of pulling the vehicle away from the Charger system. And then we decided, never done this before. Okay, we're going to change the game here. And I looked over to my safety officer and said, we're going to let it burn because the water's not working. And based on the information we gathered, we're going to let it burn, but we're still concerned about the plume. So then that's what we set up here.
I'm going to go ahead and I'll play the rest of this video. And it's just a good, I guess, visual of the kind of smoke that you're going to see on these. And for some, it just looks like light, kind of white smoke. And some might not think it's anything to be too concerned about because it's not that dark, black, gray smoke that we've always been afraid of.
You can see the wind pattern kind of pick up and change. I was concerned about what we had to the Bravo exposures because it would light up and then slow down, but it was definitely in thermal runaway.
And so here in a minute, you'll see the line start to operate because we still want to put that compartment fire out. We don't want, when we say let it burn, it's not about just letting the vehicle burn to ashes. It's about letting that battery pack burn, which is easier said than done sometimes.
Absolutely. And then you can see we do have a hose line set up. We had one on both sides with the water supply, just to make sure we protected exposures.
And we need to be careful because, all that hose line is going to push the smoke around as well. And so, we need to think about this as a hazmat scene. And so you might look at that and say, well, gosh, should we hit the seat of the fire on this thing? But I think we need to be mindful about how we're doing this. And, we could use that hose line as a tool as well. I mean, if we can redirect some of that smoke if we need to, you kind of like we learned years ago with like the LP fires and stuff. You know, we didn't have a lot of like the big LP commercial type of stuff in our district, but we always went out to the refineries and did that work with the cone pattern and stuff. You could utilize that cone pattern to control your smoke a little bit as well. And I think about, you know, what if you have a person in that vehicle and you need to buy some time for extrication?
Right.
You're going to have to get a little bit creative with your hose pattern.
And some things to think about as I was learning from this, because honestly, this was the first true EV fire I've ever had, was we slowed things way down. We actually had apparatus move out of that area, because today they're saying now it needs to be 300 feet. Well, 300 feet is basically the length of a football field. So that can change your strategy and tactics as well. And that might not be feasible every time. The second thing is you got firefighting crews sitting out there. If they're on deck or level one staging, whatever you would like to call it, they needed to be in their packs breathing air. So we had to bring in extra bottles. Then I had PD officers trying to corridor the area. I got to the point where I told them to get in their vehicle and shut off their heating system or there was air conditioner running, because you could actually literally taste those chemicals, unfortunately, in the air, even sitting in a rig with everything off. And that's not a good situation we want to be in.
So this is, I'm sharing a picture right now. This came out of the Sacramento incident. It was kind of their AAR and what they're recommending for isolation distances, hot, warm, and cold zone. And it really does match up pretty well with our SOG, but it's something we don't think about. I mean, we typically pull up on a car fire, and it's like, if we've got the ability to pull that bumper line and have a more manageable hose, then we're going to do that. But this is a time where, and I think the reason it's recommended this way is because you can set up outside of that warm zone, outside of that 150 feet area, and still have enough hose if you pull your 200-foot pre-connect.
Right.
And keep yourself safe. But it's crazy that we would have never fought a vehicle fire this way. I mean, we're right up on top of it usually. So Dave, on that call, right behind that retaining wall we saw was residential neighborhood. So what were you thinking about during that time, and how did you monitor to make sure that you didn't need to start evacuations?
And obviously our citizens are the most important thing we're worried about right then and there, especially in a situation like that. So in the back of my mind, we already had plan B going ahead. If that plume is going to change, we were going to call dispatch and automatically have them do a reverse 911 or send out information to actually have people stay in their house and shut off their HVAC systems. And we also had that set up with PD in the event we had to make that quick change and pivot based on the conditions of the wind pattern. But the wind pattern stayed pretty lazy, as you can see, and it basically went out to the Bravo side of that area and went straight up. But not only was it the residents, but it was the restaurants down the street. I was concerned about people going in and out of the McDonald's and make sure they were protected as well. So we had to continue to have a pulse check. So we utilized our resources from PD to manage that.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to have to think that in depth for a car fire. In our system, the BC isn't even toned on an initial car fire, and it's something that it becomes a full hazmat incident. And I think that just to reiterate for those company officers rolling up on this stuff, think about early tow truck for support, and think about a hazmat incident as well. You may not need a full hazmat response, but you could utilize the tools that they have and the guidance to kind of help work your evacuation zones and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, where we're sitting today is, unless something changes, you're going to be there a while. So you better plan for it, and you better plan for the right resources, and you might even have to switch them out because we were there for quite a long time.
Yeah, so Dave, you made the call to let it burn, and that's one of the techniques we're recommending in our guideline. And again, we're not saying let it burn every single time. We're just saying you're supported by the organization if it's the right situation to let it burn. There are times where we're not going to be able to do that. We're not going to let it burn if it's inside a garage, right? We're gonna knock that fire down. We're gonna hook it, and we're gonna try to drag it out. And we can talk about that a little bit later. And then we can make the determination if we're going to let it burn. If we have a vehicle fire in a in a parking garage. That's going to be a different situation. But in this case, you were out in the open, you removed it from the exposures, and you chose to let it burn. But even that, where you knew it was the right thing to do, how hard was that to make the call to let it burn? We talk about these things all the time, right? We talk about how easy it is to, well, in these hypothetical situations, just let it burn. Oh, it's an MCI. Oh, I'm just going to order in 5 city buses, and then we'll just get everybody. Though we haven't made an actual plan for it, we've never actually done it before. How was it to make that call to let it burn?
We have, I can tell you this, we have amazing firefighters in our organization and all the other auto aides that we work with. And to sit in that incident command post and look over to my safety officer and say, we're just going to let this one burn. What do you mean you're going to let it burn? We're going to let it burn. And to have that conversation with our lieutenants and our firefighters, it's not the norm. But the best part is they adapt, and we overcame it, and we said, that is what we're going to do. And we stuck to the plan, and we were all on the same page.
And it was the right thing to do. It worked out. You did have a nice weather day, so you didn't have to worry about that plume going all over the place. Right. But man, what a disaster! That simple vehicle fire. I mean, we're talking about a little, a used Nissan Leaf that someone probably got for one of those lease deals for like $29 a month or something, and exactly. It's causing all this trouble. So.
And honestly, it wasn't the fire officer we need to keep in check, but what concerned me most was the plume. That I've never been in a position to where, hey, there is a lot of vapor coming off that, a lot of toxic, corrosive gases coming off that. We have to control that. It's a whole different ball game is what those gases, where they're released and where they're moving to.
So we're encouraging our people. We're trying to give some different tools, including encouraging towing that thing away, dragging it away. Obviously, like I said earlier, if you get a tow truck in route early enough, you work with them and hopefully utilize the tow truck as your number one. That's going to be your go-to, right?
Right.
But there may be a time where we need to use our own vehicles, and we saw that in that South Metro call where they were able to use, I believe it was like an F-150 or something, and pull that thing away. Luke, can you talk about what tools we have in place right now and kind of what our recommendation is for moving a vehicle? We're not talking about towing it 2 miles down the road. We're talking about just dragging it to a safe location.
Yeah. So just for reference, so UL and FSRI they burnt, I think, 18 vehicles, EV vehicles. Chief, they even burned a bunch of your Fords, and they did a bunch of testing. So they have tons and tons of research. They did kind of a soft presentation that provided tons of information. And then in April, they're going to come out with their recommendation for firefighting. So out of these like soft recommendations, they give like a minimum distance for exposures without wind is 18 feet, right? So in our minds, my mind prior, I was thinking that we needed to have, like 50 feet, 100 feet surrounded by a vehicle. But they're saying, one of the things that we have concerns about is that we have these ability of the lithium-ion battery to have a flame, and they said in their testing they saw flames no bigger than 8 feet. So their recommendation currently for a standard size EV is 18. So in that thought process, we do not have to pull very far, right? So if we can identify early, and part of that identification is like our company officers making sure that's EV vehicle, or if they roll up onto an EV vehicle, using suppression to identify if it is in thermal runaway or if it's a compartment fire, right? So if we need to spray water initially just to make sure that we're on the right pages, because we don't want to let a compartment fire that we could have put out turn into an EV fire, then now we burn for 3 hours, right? So use suppression to knock that out. And then if we have the foresight or the capability to bring a tow truck in, that will be our number one option. But if we don't have that, all of our frontline apparatus carries a tow chain cluster. So they can attach to any portion of an EV vehicle. I don't know if we've done a ton of research, or our listeners done a ton of research. There are not a lot of great places to connect to EVs. So tires, wheels, everything else that you can get into, get that attached early. And then when one of our support vehicles that show up, BC rig, SAM rig, or our Bureau 1 rig are outfitted with chains, we'll utilize one of those vehicles to pull that vehicle that 18, 20 feet away from the exposure. thought process too is that it is the vehicle that's being utilized for the towing. It is not the personnel. So we're not taking a BC and making him into a tactical position. We're keeping him in an operations position. We're just utilizing their vehicle to get that vehicle initially away.
It's a great point you made too about if it's a compartment fire, put out the compartment fire. We need to determine that. So we should attack this thing as if, we're in an investigative mode, but we're trying to put this fire out to start with. So
Right.
we just sometimes in the fire service, maybe it's just us, maybe it's just our department, but we tend to be a little reactionary and we go to one extreme or another and we think everything's black and white. In this case, it's not. And so we're not telling everybody to just, it's an electric vehicle that's on fire. We're going to just let it burn, walk away from it. We need to determine first that we can't extinguish that fire or it's going to be a frivolous attempt anyway. Make sure that it's not that compartment fire. Continue to put out that compartment fire. You can still cool that battery compartment in order for us to, if we do need to make some moves, if we need to pull it away, that sort of thing, and just make a good educated decision. And at that point, then we support that. And there's no point in doing something that we're just going to end up flushing thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons of water down the storm drain when we're not even going to get that thing put out. So I also, if we are talking about towing, can we talk about, the relationships we've built with our local tow truck companies? Because we're lucky to have a couple that are willing to help us out with this. But I think we're going to maybe run into some more restrictions down the road. How did you build that relationship as a committee with those tow companies, Luke?
We just reached out to, so essentially we have, in our city, we have 2 tow companies that do the majority of our towing. So we reached out, we talked to them, we gave them considerations of what we thought, what we've seen around the country and how they want to do it. And then they have way more experience, right, dealing with this because that's what they do for their job, is that they have way more. So we talked it out and we kind of came to a consensus, but it's kind of the same thing. So we've gone full circle on some of them. Our thought process as of right now is that we let that vehicle burn until there is no more potential. And that means that there is no more energy in any of those battery cells possible. And that determination is super difficult. So at that point, when we make that determination, the tow company, it depends on which one we're doing, we'll help them load the tow company based on the vehicle and how much is left of it. We could wrap that into a EV blanket just for an exposure protection, not thinking that we're encapsulating or putting the fire out, with the intention that it would give us time to get the vehicle back off the truck if it were to start on fire again. And then we've even considered, do we marry up? Do we send an engine crew with that tow company to follow them all the way to their yard and make sure that they have safe travel? And it kind of is dependent on the tow company. Some of them want that, some of them don't. Some of them think they wanted it and now have changed their mind. So it's going to be like a base on base. I think it's going to be this direct conversation with the tow truck driver. Be like, hey, we're willing to give you all of these options. What options do you want? For us, none of these tow company facilities are within our city. So we're essentially sending our problem out of our city into somebody else's district. So whatever we can do to mitigate and protect that, I think that's super important for us. Tow companies are trying to create special locations that have the space that you can put these vehicles. And if they have the potential of off-gassing or starting back on fire, that it's not going to have any impacts on their location. And in that conversation with Conley, like their thought process with the influx of more EVs is they're looking at land outside of their current space, like outside of the city, outside of, out in the east, that they can put these things, let them do what they want to do. So that's kind of our tow company thought process there.
And you're dead on with that, Chief Gearhard. On the e-fire I had, that was the next step. We had the tow company there, and we're like, okay, what's next? So we obviously mitigated that, and then we loaded it up onto that, and then we did exactly what you stated. We took an engine and we followed them to the wrecker yard. I spoke with the owner that day or that evening, and he said, look, it's getting more difficult to house these EV vehicles because of state law. And right now they have to have a minimum of 50 feet from anything around that one vehicle they put in their yard. And he got to the point stating, maybe some of these cities might have to find their own property to where we pull them out of that area and then we stick them in a certain area. So there's a lot of discussion on what we're going to do with these after the incident.
This whole EV thing is pretty interesting, right? So in the technology, we're running into like our first decade of EV vehicles on the road. In the next 10 years, we're going to triple the amount of EV vehicles that are out there. So our EV vehicles are now just starting to hit a stage where they're getting older and coming out of service, and nobody knows what to do with them. So they're taking them places and they're storing them, right? Like this thought process of replenishing or pulling out the batteries and redoing it, it's not, that technology is not necessary. It's not cost effective. And then these vehicles that are sitting are spontaneously starting on fire. So it's created this whole new danger for us. So now we're having these vehicles that are out there, right? So like this is just going to continue to grow however direction it is, but it's going to get interesting over the next several years.
Even if someone just decided tomorrow to stop manufacturing these things, we've got a lot of them out there right now, and it'll just be the next. We're just going to move on to the next type of energy storage system. This may just be the first step in something else, and so they're definitely pumping them out pretty fast. You mentioned blankets a minute ago, and we were watching, all the departments around us were starting to put blankets on, and it's like, okay, well, I guess it probably would be a good tool to have, and most are recommending blankets, and we'd move beyond the part where there were some manufacturers out there selling like piercing nozzles and stuff like that. I think we realized pretty quick that that's when we say this isn't black and white, that's probably one of those black and whites that we're not going to pierce these things. But with blankets, it's been kind of a gray area, and a lot of it was because of the UL, the NIST studies and stuff like that, the explosion risk, all the gases building up underneath. But we're still carrying them, and we still see value in those. What's the time that we're going to use those EV blankets?
Yeah, I mean, evolution of EV blankets, right? The initial thought process before we had the science behind it, that we could smother the fire and keep it contained, and that's not the reality. It's really cool. Like get on YouTube and watch EV blanket deployment, and if you watch these deployments over true EV fires, that smoke and fire is so forceful that you can't even really contain it. And even if you do contain it, one, you're creating a gigantic balloon that has tons and tons of potential, or they just burn through them. Right. So in our theory, in our thought, we didn't really necessarily have a direction that we were going, but through the science and by taking time of just seeing what best practices are, we've determined that those are mostly going to be utilized for exposures. So like in Dave's situation, if you could throw it over that charging unit and just reduce the direct impact of the thermal heat and the fire impingement just for those moments that it would take to remove that vehicle from that exposure, that's our thought process, is that we're going to use these for those type of things. And then it would be on the secondary stage, right? Fire has been contained. We may use one of these to keep the car under wrap as it's being towed, if that's the tow truck driver's initiative. So that's another portion of all the science that's coming out. They utilize those in these research scenarios that they did. So I think we'll probably see some more directive of where that will go. But I do think what our choice, and that's pretty much a universal across the North area, is not that we're not going to run into other cities and they're throwing them over top of a burning vehicle. I think everybody's pretty much in this thought that if it is truly a thermal runaway, we're letting these things burn.
I think it goes back to that. We're going to be creative with it. We're going to use it as just another tool. I think about, and this is a topic for all hours of conversation, but we've got, these underground parking garages all over the place, multi-story parking garages and these mid-rises that are popping up everywhere. A lot of them, we're trying to keep the chargers out of them, but this is where our bureau really comes in huge. They're going to have to make sure that we're being proactive on this, but I could see that, maybe being a really good use for those blankets is you got a vehicle parking lot or a parking garage where you can protect a couple exposures around it and let that, most of our parking garages now are protected. Not that that's going to be able to put the fire out, but maybe kind of protect the area around it. And then so, we're going to be, instead of thinking about extinguishment, we're going to be thinking about protecting everything in the vicinity of it.
I think that's, I'm just going to jump on that, Chief. So when we look at lithium-ion EV vehicles, like, I don't know what the stat is, I'm going to say 80, but it is super high. Like the percentage of vehicles that start on fire or batteries that start on fire are through charging units, right? Or
Hmm.
another portion is damage. So it's not necessarily we have
Hmm.
these spontaneous combustion. It's usually the battery's been damaged prior, then all of a sudden gets jostled just right at lights, or it's connected to an EV or to a charger. So that thought process, we have, I mean, as we do, we follow other departments or other cities, and they're making legislation that they're removing all those charging units and they have to be out into space because of this potential. So the things that, charging units inside, like especially for us with Texas wraps, with the building surrounded a parking garage that now goes on the ground. I used to fear the Weston as my number one fire, but this has now become, the number one fire because there's
Hmm.
so much. It's not even, I mean, more of like a exposure portion of it than it is, actually fighting the fire portion of it. So I do think that's something that we'll have to look at as far as tactics, and then, you're
Oh,
just creating a gigantic box of potential
yeah.
fire, unburnt fuel. It's pretty crazy.
With hundreds of exposures and humans above that as well. I think it's going to be the next. I mean, we're already working on it, but I think it's going to be a real big focus area for us. It's just so complicated in that way, and we've got minimal resources, and so we really need our officers to think when they come on scene. Like Dave, you said earlier, this is a time we might want to slow down. Obviously, make the immediate rescues. That's our priority. Get the people out of there. We can burn up 100 cars, but we need to get the people out of that toxic environment. Another thing I think to keep in mind is, in the past, we've always considered pulling like foam lines and that sort of thing for vehicle fires. And foam is not going to be an effective extinguishing agent for us, or neither is dry chem. So think about that. If we get that extrication call, that a lot of times we'll at least have a fire extinguisher out. Typically, a line though pulled. Look, considering the gasoline fire potential, and this is not a
Right.
time that we're going to do that. So water is going to be our best bet there, and we may even need to get a little bit creative. I've heard a lot of departments really using like cellar nozzles and that sort of thing to buy some time, cool off that vehicle. So there's tools all over in our toolbox. The problem is sometimes we name them things that, like cellar nozzles, that make us think that they're not for something like this, but we're going to need to be creative.
That's a big concern of mine. You get an extrication on a highway and that underneath's on fire, you're going to have to use some type of copious amounts of water to keep that thing in check, and maybe even put a blanket on in that area while you're extricating that victim. So
Yeah.
it's some dynamic entertainment changes of how we're going to operate on those
Right.
situations.
And it's a whole different direction that we haven't thought about. Right. We were talking about the other day about Cybertrucks, and they have bulletproof glass, right? Have we ever tried to cut through bulletproof glass? Right. And I'm like, no, I've never even seen it. I've never seen it anywhere that I've looked at. I've never even thought about it, but those are like, that's the potential. Eventually we'll have a rollover in this truck.
Exactly.
Right. So it's these things that we haven't even really thought about.
Luke, why don't we look at Varney's incident and kind of compare it to the policy and see how things lined up?
Yeah. So I think the EV, although it poses a lot of challenges, it's also super exciting because it's something that's new within the fire service, which drives innovation and us to think bigger. So if we take the scenario that Dave and his crew worked through, so we can just apply our policy directly. So things to think about, right, is to, one, initiate, make sure that we understand that it's an EV vehicle, not. Chief Lindberger spoke about how we have license plates, and then we also have the small sticker that's in the front window. Remember, that's for Colorado only. So we have out-of-staters, that requirement's not the same. So we still need to do a good job of understanding. We do have on our tablets, we have that EV rescue that if you have the vehicle type, you can put in there. It would help you identify what that vehicle is. So we need to do that early identification portion. And then if we take that scenario where it is plugged into that charger, it is imperative that we remove its plug-in, right? Like we pull it from that plug-in as soon as possible. So that was fantastic. The citizen pulled it prior. Understand that also all of those chargers are supposed to have within 100 feet of them have a master switch that will de-energize all of the chargers, right? So Varney did a great job of pulling the XL, having them isolate that. And then he removed that vehicle, which is a fantastic, probably the best thing that he did was removing the vehicle from there, because then it just reduces this priority. One of the things we've talked about too is trying to identify smoke to see if smoke can identify if it's an EV vehicle or if it's a true compartment fire. There are slight variances, but I would never say that there's a definite, like you can never just say that the light smoke is 100% of thermal runaway. You can never say that the dark smoke is 100% compartment, or, like there's a hybrid vehicle. So do your due diligence, make sure that you're utilizing that water use suppression for your identification, right? As Varney did, they sprayed the compartment, they knocked down that fire, but it was very, very obvious that the flame jet from that fire was coming out from underneath that vehicle, which is indicative of EV fire, right? Identify early that it's in thermal runaway, and then from that, everything slows down. Portion we didn't talk about is always the life safety, right? That is always our priority. We'll risk a ton to help pull somebody out of that if we can. So once that life safety has been mitigated and that's out of our consideration, then we just slow that process down. Make sure that we're uphill, upwind, and every drop of that water has now just became a hazmat incident for us, right? And these are things that we don't think about. We don't think about containment on our water. We don't think about containment on our smoke. Most times we let these things burn and go. So Barney did a good job of understanding where his smoke was going. Think about it early. If evacuations need to happen, make that happen. Pull them out of there if you need to. And then, as Barney did, just let it burn, let it go. Keep it from. The other science is showing that the EV vehicles do burn hotter, but they burn just as long as a regular vehicle, right? So the duration portion is just the duration portion. And the best thing to do is let it burn. So it pulls all that potential energy out of that battery. So when we move it, then we don't have any other considerations. And then good conversation with your tow vehicle or tow company of how they want to transport and get it off the scene.
Yeah, and then the last thing is the PPE. We got to remember to bag that PPE at that incident. Do not get in your rig, bag it there. Because if the carcinogen's on there, we do not want to be anywhere near that. Get it going, put it up on top of your hose bed, whatever, as you transport that, and then get that sent off.
We were talking about that South Metro fire chief, and they brought in a logistics apparatus and loaded all that PPE, and it never even went inside the rig. That might be the proper way of doing it.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that.
Just make sure, like we've talked about the Sacramento, there are countless cases of limited smoke exposure that have done significant, some career-ending damage, right? So we just got to make sure we're taking care of our people, keeping them out of that with no unnecessary. I would think we've seen some videos where we've seen unnecessary exposure to smoke when the decision's already been made that that vehicle's going to burn. Like, we can't do that. If we know that we're just going to let it burn, there's a life safety, stay away, stay out of that, stay out of all of it.
Yeah, and probably more out of it than you think. You need to keep even more distance than you think you need to. It's really incumbent on our officers to ensure that our people are full PPE, breathing air the entire time. We've got an unlimited supply of air, especially for an incident like this. We'll bring a trailer down to you if we need to, and we'll rotate those bottles out. And so we are still learning too. We may discover down the road that some of this gear just needs to be replaced too. I think that even the CO2 cleaning, some of them are so saturated that this is a bigger deal. And I think we're going to have bigger picture, strategic, like administrative things we're going to have to think about down the road as far as we are treating these things like a hazmat. We are billing the insurance companies, the producer of the issue, and we just don't have those systems in place right now. But I think that's where we're going to get to.
With those corrosive vapors and everything else, it's so important what you just stated, to have those crews. Unfortunately, they're going to be in packs. They're going to be packed up, bunked up on air the whole time of that incident if they're exterior, because that those vapors that are floating in the air, we don't want our firefighters breathing that whatsoever. And it
Yeah.
extends further out. Now we're gonna have to use air monitoring equipment. We're gonna have to get the hazmat team in there. So things that I would have changed that. I would have brought the hazmat team. I would have gotten them out there. I would have gotten the air monitoring system so we could truly see in that area what's going on.
I'll link in the show notes. I'll link that Sacramento incident and all the things that we've been talking about here, because I think they're just great resources to learn from. And the thing is, they didn't do anything wrong. They didn't do anything different than any of us would have done. And unfortunately, some really bad things happen.
Yeah. It's a learning environment for all of us, and then we got to keep adapting to what's in front of us. It's not going to be black and white whatsoever. That's the gray area we operate in.
Agreed. Make sure it's exposure of our hoses, exposure, it's all those people in our hoses to the water. So we just got to make sure we're doing this soft study that I've talked about a bunch. They've kind of renewed their studies on car fires in general, and even in a gas operated vehicle, like the toxins that are coming off that are completely different than they were 15 years ago, right? So I think this is the way we're approaching EV vehicles probably needs to be more across the board. Even when we're going for a normal car fire, I should have all these same tactics, 150, feet of cold zone, like all those things. I think we probably need to start applying that to all of our car fires for our protection.
In a perfect world, we would want to cross those T's and dot I's even more. After that incident, I got to thinking, okay, if I could smell this in my rig, in my SUV, then now we need to take that SUV rig over to our fleets and have them swap out those air filters. We need to consider that in the apparatus as well. Just we got to think outside the box. And at the end of the day, it's about taking care of our people.
Yeah, and maybe that's what it is that we need to develop. Now we've got the incident operating guidelines, and either we need to add the post-incident information into it, or we need to create our own, maybe post-incident checklist of the things that we're going to take care of after the fact. Because you're there for a long time. People are going to be worn out, tired, frustrated because it's just a stupid vehicle fire, right? But it's just going to take some time. It's going to take resources. We're going to have to there's notifications we have to make even within our own city. We need to make sure if this water is running down the storm drain, that we're making sure that we're notifying the people from the stormwater facility, that sort of thing that we just don't always think about on these things. So yeah, I just appreciate all that information. As we start to kind of wrap up here, Luke, are there other things that you want people to know that would be important for our firefighters or any firefighters to know about our current state and the approach that we're taking?
I always go back to education is key, right? Like even our company officers need to be well versed, but it's not solely upon their shoulders to make all the decisions. Firefighters have to understand too the potentials and the risk factors, right? Like what they should be doing. So I think education is key, that we need to continue to learn about this and also understand that these documents that we created are not all encompassing. Like this is not want to fly over your seat, but sometimes it is, right? We're making decisions on the scene as best as we possibly can to mitigate all the considerations. And then I think as an overall industry, I think we just need to be willing to not get caught up in our own thoughts of what is and isn't right, and be able to look at the science, do what has actually been done, what has actually been proven to work, what doesn't work, and continue to focus this to make it a better policy for all of us for operations.
Where would you recommend people go? What are some resources you've used if they want to learn more about this topic? Real data-driven resources for people to use.
There's some really great podcasts that are out there. Stash, that guy is a mechanical engineer, and he's a EV guru. He has just lots of good information, and he has access to people that are way smarter than him. So he pulls in a bunch of people that just have really great information. UL Learning, if you haven't been on that, it's I think it's actually fsri.edu, I think is what it is. But they have modules in there that talk about small battery packs, considerations for that. They have this light 1 hour education that they just put out, and then they're going to have this gigantic information will come out in March. But we do a lot of YouTube and we do a lot of internet searching. I just always make sure that you're vetting the information. Just if you read one or see one video, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is law. Make sure that you're talking about it. Make sure you're doing your cross education. Make sure that it all makes sense. But there's not a ton. That's kind of the problem. There's not a ton of solid information or science on it. Like 10 years of having these vehicles, we just haven't spent a lot of time researching all of it. So I think this UL study that's coming out will be probably our go-to guide towards the future. EPA came out with a really nice guide about exposures and considerations for environmental stuff. So there's information out there. Some of it's really wordy, but there is stuff out there. So you just got to keep digging.
How about you, Dave? Anything else you'd like to add or think it'd be important for people to know?
I think Chief Gearhard nailed it. It's a continuous learning thing. We got to be adaptive. We got to be able to pivot when necessary. This is so new to us, and we got to be open and do not think black and white. There's a lot of gray in this, and just continue to learn and adapt.
Well, speaking of learning, David, what keeps you motivated after all these years to continue to want to learn and grow and be one of the most, motivated people and passionate people on our fire department?
Absolutely. Honestly, I think it's just the passion I have in the firefighting world. It never stops, and I enjoy it thoroughly, and I just have a passion to always continue making changes when changes are right and they're necessary, and to listen. We gotta listen to our people out there. There's so many highly intelligent individuals, and I'll speak to our organization and surrounding organizations, that it's always evolving, and I just enjoy it. And I don't know, it hasn't changed.
Yeah, you've been doing it for a while, and we appreciate that. How about you, Luke? What kind of keeps you motivated? I mean, you guys are both so involved in stuff, and you don't have to be. I mean, we do this by choice. We expect you to show up every day and do your job, but there's certain people in our organization that just go the extra mile. Luke, what kind of keeps you motivated to want to make things better?
I don't know. Early in my life, I was pounded by a football coach who said, if you're green, you're growing. If you're ripe, you're dying, right? So I've always tried to keep that mindset that I got to continuously learn. And it's all aspects, right? It's not just, it's leadership. It's your personal life. It's like all these things that you got to continuously mold and make better. And then I feel like my job as a BC is to create exceptional people. You do that through education, right? So I love the education portion. I love training. I love having those conversations. So that's where I feel like I have the ability to influence our department. I love having dates and having conversation with our populace. They are wicked smart individuals, right? From the firefighter down to our lieutenants, they're very smart, educated people. So you pull those people in, you have great conversations and create projects and committees, and we continue to move forward.
I'm just going to dovetail right into that, because you're well spoken, Chief Gearhart. And I truly believe I can speak for all of our chiefs in our organization. It comes down to one thing. In my opinion, we do what's right for our people. We take care of our people, and that includes the community and the citizens we serve. And we're always doing that, and we always have that pulse. We can go to bed at night saying we're doing things right and we're keeping our people safe. That's what it comes down to.
Well said, guys. Appreciate you guys coming on. I do like to always wrap this thing up with kind of summarize some of the lessons here, and we went off on a few different tangents, and so I'm probably not going to catch it all, but I think to start with, and this kind of applies to everything in the fire service. We don't have all the answers yet, but I think we've got a good start, and I appreciate the group coming together and giving us some guidelines to follow. None of these situations are going to be black and white. You take that EV fire and then you put it inside an enclosed building and everything changes, or any kind of battery fire. We're often going to have to be creative with what we do. Again, not black and white. Get creative. Understand the tools you have on your rig. Like, I think that's an issue, or something that we can all do better, is understand the tools and the capabilities of the tools that we have. Letting it burn is easier to say than it is to do, but it is often the right thing to do. But the thing to think about here is it's not a passive move. Like, that's a well thought out, forward-thinking, aggressive tactic in some ways. Like some may think it's passive and we're just giving up on it, but that's not the case. Get that tow truck coming early, especially for you company officers responding to this scene. If you get the information that it is an EV vehicle, they are there to work with us. We've built those relationships in the background so that does work. And remember, we're more often fighting smoke than we are fire in these situations. So wear your mask. Always consider where that smoke is going to travel. Determining the battery is in thermal runaway and the best course of action. We talked about that. It's easier to say than it is to do, but you need to determine that it's in thermal runaway first before you make that decision. And then, if it's in an enclosed building or threatening a structure, think about removing the threat. So get it out of there. And then these incidents are very, very time consuming. They don't end when the incident terminates. We always have to consider the downstream effects. We have to decon. We have to assist that tow company. We have to think about making our proper notifications, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot more than your standard car fire or your standard RC car fire. So again, just really appreciate you guys coming on today. Great information. We talked for a lot longer than I had planned to. I hope people find it valuable. For those listening to the show, watching the show that would like to propose some ideas for us to talk about, please email me, reach out. You can reach us here at opstalk.wfd@gmail.com. I'm always up for new ideas, and please, if you like what we're doing, like the show, rate the show, follow, and get all of our newest episodes. And like I said, we'll note all these things in the show notes that you can refer back to. Appreciate you guys coming on. Appreciate you following along. Everyone, have a great day. We'll hopefully see you again soon.
Thanks for having us on.